The first category of CSS properties that we'll look at are colors and fonts. Let's start with colors. So there's an attribute called color. It gives the foreground color. There's an attribute called background color. It gives the background color. Notice the inconsistency in names. They're not called foreground color and background color. They're called color and background color. For, it seems kind of natural the color is the foreground, but nevertheless, it's a little bit inconsistent in names. So corresponding to background color is not foreground dash color, it's just color. And then we'll see on the next section that you can put borders and margins around things, and you can color the border with border color. So here's a quick example. I make a CSS selector that starts with a dot. That means you apply it by using class. And for the properties, I say the foreground color of the text should be red. The background color of the section should be, and we'll see what this means in the next section, but this means green. And the border color should be black. So it's red text with a green background with a black box around it. All right, I said we'll see what this means and why that means green. Let's look at the color units we can supply. And surprisingly, there's a very small number of officially defined color names. Aqua, black, blue, fuchsia, and so forth, but there's not very many. This seems like a pretty small set of names. Now, the very first web browser that was ever created was running on a Next machine. And a Next machine ran Unix, and its graphics was X Windows. So it supported the goofy Crayola crayon-like X window color names that have all sorts of things, chocolate and corn silk and salmon. My personal favorite is papaya whip. And these are not part of the official specification, but every browser, at least every browser up to 2015, but probably every browser for the foreseeable future still supports them for historical reasons. And so some HTML developers like to use those, but it's a little bit unclear and they're not technically official. I would stick with either the officially defined color names or more likely an RGB specification. So if I say color space, and I give this sort of funny format, the pound sign means it's a color specification. And then I have two characters that are in hexadecimal, base 16. So 00 means 0, FF means 255. Hexadecimal base 16, why are we in the dark ages? Well, these are for historical reasons. People thought more in octal and hex back then, and so, they're more compact, and so we're stuck with it now. And so it's very hard to visualize. All right, it's this much red, RGB stands for red, green, blue, and this much green, and this much blue. And even if you do it this way, it's the same issue. It's hard to visualize. So just try it. And many HTML or CSS development tools will have an editor where you can kind of click on a bar and slide it back and forth and see the color that you get. So the best advice is here, either try it or there's a few patterns that are obvious. If you use, FF0000, it means red. FF00FF means magenta and so forth. And there's some kind of commonly known patterns. I would use those commonly known patterns instead of papaya whip. So I would say use either the official names or use an RGB specification, but you're going to have to experiment a little because it won't be obvious by looking at the code, except in a few cases, what actual color that specification corresponds to. All right, so here's a quick example of all three cases. I have something that begins with a dot. So I'd have to say H2 class equals cool, or table class equals cool, or div class equals cool to apply it. I give the foreground color and I give one of the official color names. I give the background color and I give an RGB specification. And I give the border color and I do what is still common but I don't recommend, which is I give one of the unofficial but universally supported original X window color names that are still supported today but are not part of the spec. All right, that's colors. Foreground color, background color, border color. There's a few others, but those are the most common ones. Fonts. You can give a size to a font. you can give an exact size, this number of pixels. The problem with that is it doesn't scale well when you have other styles applied. So suppose you say, I want to make all the fonts in my page 20% bigger because we ran some tests and everybody said the page was too hard to read. Well, if you have 25 pixels, 18 pixels, 14 pixels, 97 pixels, 152 pixels, a whole bunch of places, you got to change all of them and make them 20% bigger. So it's probably better to use percentages. Make this 25% bigger than it would have been otherwise, than the default would have been. And so then you can kind of make a base font for the page, and then you can scale it a little more easily. So it's still not that uncommon to give an exact size in pixels, but if you want to be able to kind of make the whole page bigger or smaller, it's better to primarily use percentages, not pixels or other units. You can give a font family. This is basically a specific font. And notice that you can have options. So what this means is use Times New Roman if that font is available on the current system. If Times New Roman is not available on the system that the end user is running, then use Times. If neither Times New Roman nor Times are available, then use the default serifed or serif font. Let me explain this in a little more detail. First of all, serifs or serifs. That little funny hooky thing right here at the bottom of the F, that's a serif or a serif. So this F is a non-serifed or sans serif font, whereas this F is a serifed font. And then notice that I use quotes around Times New Roman, but I didn't have to use quotes around Times and serif. The basic rule is if the font name has spaces in it, you have to put it in quotes. If it doesn't have spaces in it, you're allowed to but not required to put it in quotes. So let me recap. Try this first. If that exact font name is available on the end user system, use it. If it's not available, use this. If that's not available, use whatever serif font is available on the system. And every system's got some serif font and some sans serif, non-serif font. Font style is variations like italic, and font weight is variations like bold.